Imagine a parent who says, "Do as I say, but not as I do." Now imagine that this parent controls the entire universe, demands worship, and punishes you forever and ever if you don't obey him. That's the kind of situation we're in with the God of the Bible. Christians say God is perfectly moral, perfectly just, and perfectly consistent. But when you actually read the rules that he gives to humans and then look at his own behavior, something very weird happens. God doesn't seem to follow any of his own rules. So today, I'm asking a very simple question. If God wrote the rule book, why does he keep breaking it? Let's talk about it. We all know thou shalt not kill, but this doesn't apply to the God, does it? He kills constantly. One of the clearest commandments in the whole Bible is thou shalt not kill. Pretty straightforward for humans. Don't kill. I think we all have a pretty good grasp on what this means. But the God of the Bible, he kills constantly every single day. We all know the story of the flood, where God wipes out almost every living thing on the entire planet. And we're told that this is okay for him to do. Really? Then there is the firstborn of Egypt, all dead. In Exodus chapter 12 of the Holy Bible, we see that at midnight, God kills all of the Egyptian firstborn children. Take a moment and think about that. Just how cruel is it to kill all of the Egyptians' firstborn children? Parents all over Egypt having their children killed by God. In what world would anybody consider this acceptable or a loving thing to do? In Samuel chapter 6, verse 7, a man named Uzzah touches the Ark of the Covenant to stop it from falling, and he's struck dead by God. The context is very clear. David is moving the ark to Jerusalem on a cart pulled by cattle, and the cart starts to shake. This man, Uzzah, touches the ark to prevent it from hitting the ground, and you would think this was a good thing, right? But the holy God decides to kill this man on the spot. What a horrible example of morality. God is an immoral monster as depicted in this story. This man's intentions were good, and he wanted to protect the ark. And yet the terrifying, grotesque God kills him instantly with no warning. What about when God kills 42 young boys because they were just teasing the prophet Elisha? This story happens in 2 Kings chapter 2. The young boys in the story make fun of the prophet by calling him Baldy. And the prophet curses them in the name of the Lord, and God sends 42 bears out of the woods to maul the boys to death. Just stop and think about it. God commands humans to forgive insults, turn the other cheek, and love their enemies. But when someone teases his prophet, he unleashes wild bears on young men. If a human did any of this, we would call it mass murder. But when God does it, it's called holy. This is a pattern we see all the time. Rules for you and exceptions to the rules for him. Do not covet, but God is jealous. Now let's look at thou shalt not covet for us and the statement that God is a jealous God. Kind of makes no sense, right? But God literally describes himself as a jealous God, not metaphorically, explicitly. He demands exclusive worship, punishes people for following other gods, and even calls himself a consuming fire. If jealousy is a moral flaw for humans, why is it a divine virtue for the God? It's like telling your kids not to smoke while you're puffing a cigarette in their face. It really gets obnoxious, doesn't it? Then there is the command, do not lie. But we read in the Bible where God sends deception. Now, Christians tell you that God cannot lie, but the Bible shows God using deception when it suits him. In 1 Kings chapter 22, verses 19 to 23, God sends a lying spirit to deceive King Ahab. The story tells us that King Ahab wants to go to war, and he asks his prophets if he will win. The prophets tell him what he wants to hear and say, yes, God will give you this victory. But he then goes on to bring in one more prophet. And this prophet tells the king that he may fail. So we have a contradiction amongst prophets, which by itself is ridiculous. But the important part of this story is that a spirit suddenly appears and says, I will go out and be a lying spirit in the mouths of all his prophets. And God approves of this. Yes, God approves of sending a lying spirit. God initiates the plan, he authorizes deception, and he uses a lying spirit to mislead King Ahab. And this deception does lead to the king's death. So again, we see rules for men to not lie, while God clearly will use lies when it suits his plan. Just ridiculous. In 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 of the New Testament, God sends a powerful delusion so people will believe a lie. We all know that a delusion can be very deceptive, but we read in context that the Thessalonian church is confused about the end times, and Paul describes the rise of the man of lawlessness. Now, the people are already embracing the lies of this man of lawlessness. And it says that these people refused to love the truth. And they delighted in wickedness. Now, what does God do? He hands them over to deception. So Paul says that therefore God allows them to fully embrace a falsehood that God himself sends. So once again, we see God forbidding humans from lying, but using deception when it suits his own purpose. This is a classic example of a double standard. There's no way around it. If a human intentionally deceived someone to cause their downfall, we'd call it manipulation. But when God does it, it's part of his holy plan. How about love your enemies, but God destroys his enemies? Jesus says, love your enemies, turn the other cheek, bless those who curse you. But God annihilates his enemies. We see entire nations wiped out often in the Holy Bible, don't we? Cities are burned, people are stoned to death, even for the most minor of offenses. If loving your enemies is the highest moral standard, why doesn't God model it? Why does he demand behavior from humans that he himself refuses to demonstrate? How about this one? Do not punish children for their parents' sins, except when God does. The Bible seems to say children should not be punished for the sins of their parents. And I agree. But we see in the Bible that God kills David's newborn because of David's actions. God punishes Israel for the sins of its kings. God threatens to curse families to the third and fourth generation. This is sick, folks. If a human judge punished a child for their father's crimes, we would call it immoral. But when God does it, we're told it's holy and divine. This God does not even follow his own rules. There's a pattern here. God is above his own rules. When you line up all these contradictions, it becomes very clear. God gives human rules that he himself does not follow. He demands moral behavior that he does not model. He punishes actions that he himself does. This isn't moral consistency. It's divine authoritarianism. Isn't this what it's really all about? The rules apply downward, never upward. It's always about submission, fear, and control. God does not follow his own rules. God behaves like a ruler who demands obedience, but exempts himself from the standards that he imposes. Does this sound familiar considering what we see in America with the uprising of Christian nationalism. It's all about authoritarianism, isn't it? And if morality only applies to the powerless, is it really morality? I don't think so. I would love to hear your opinions. So please comment below. And if you want to support the channel, please like and subscribe. I also have a link in the description. So if you would like, you can buy me a coffee. That's it. Just buy me a coffee. Until next time, think rationally and be happy.